centimeters. The Jews were always there for every minority. It's time that they came now will protect us and spoke out against Jew hatred. Soy. As far as the Jewish members of Congress, forget about it.
Why do you hiding your face?
Excuse me, is there any chance I get an interview? Is there any chance I get an interview?
What? Sure.
So we're out here today at the rally against anti-Semitism. I see you have a sign over here that says, anti-Semitism, shameful, irrational Jew hatred. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you're out here, what the sign means?
Well, I'm out here because the anti-Semites is growing and people keep quiet. Because if you goddamn say it about blacks or do something against gays, everybody would jump. Yeah. And the papers don't say anything when we rally on 42nd Street before they sort of deal with Iran. 15,000 people on 42nd Street. The New York Times didn't mention it. Nobody mentioned it because it's just goddamn Jews. The Jews are leaving now France because they can't go with the Star of David because it's too dangerous. They leaving London, and I don't want it to happen here. That's why I'm here.
Absolutely. I want to follow up and ask you, the media's talking a lot about anti-Semitism. The New York Times, I hear them talk about anti-Semitism all the time, but they're talking about anti-Semitism from white supremacists or Nazis. What do you think about that? Because we hear about anti-Semitism.
Well, the anti-Semites, mostly,
a little bit quieter, yeah.
Mostly, are Muslims all over the world. And when they kill us, they say, Allahu Akbar. And they say, oh, it's not a terrorist.
So you're more fearful of the Muslim anti-Semites here in the United States and around the world?
Around the world, they say so, they do so. The white supremacists are a small group, and they've always been there, and let them scream. But the Muslims are killing us all over.
Why don't you think the mainstream media is talking about the black people or the Muslims perpetrating these attacks and only talking about the white people who are perpetrating these attacks?
Because there are very few white people they do. I am white privilege, and God damn it, I earned it.
Absolutely. One last question. We have one Democratic Jewish candidate, or at least a secular Jewish candidate, Bernie Sanders, and he brought on Linda Sarsour as a surrogate. Linda Sarsour, she's from Brooklyn, so I wanted to ask you, what do you think about Bernie Sanders, a Jewish candidate, bringing on Linda Sarsour and normalizing her?
Well, if you know Jewish history, the Bet HaMikdash, the temple was destroyed by Jew haters like Sanders. And like we have some of them, so unfortunately, we do, and they are the worst. But they shouldn't get away with that. Those Muslim women that coming there very overtly anti-Semites, anti-Israel, which they say anti-Israel is not anti-Semite. Yes, they are. We have one country. You see that? Okay.
58 Arab states, one Jewish state.
Okay, you see that? That's true. And 6 of us attacked us 4 times, and we won. There's no other country.
Absolutely.
They're winning and then say, oh, please, let's have peace. How many times we offer peace? What, they're crazy?
I think like 6 or 7 times at least.
Yeah, there's no 2-state solution. Some things never has solution. How about that?
Absolutely. Just quickly in conclusion, was there anything else you wanted to mention?
Well, I want to mention that I'm glad we are here, and that I want us to be more militant and less nice guys. I'm tired of the Jews try to appease, try to be nice, so they would like us. They're not going to like us no matter what. So fight for it.
Do you think we should arm some of the Jews in Crown Heights, that they should have the ability to have firearms?
Absolutely. I don't want the police to, even though they're nice, I want every synagogue to have somebody there with a gun that know how to shoot, that got permits, that been in the army, and do it from the inside, because somebody standing outside is the first one gets shot, and then they have free ride. Absolutely. Every place that there are Jews should be somebody
To protect them.
To protect them. I am there to protect them.
Absolutely. We're out here today at the Rally Against Anti-Semitism. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you're out here and what you guys are hoping to accomplish?
There's a lot of anti-Semitism going on in New York City, and this time is coming from the black community, the Islamic community, the Hispanic community, and they are beating up Jews, not simply because of this theoretical thing called hate, but because of anti-Semitism. It's hate against Jews. They see Jews also as an easy target, and we want it stopped. And that's why we're here, to send a message. It should stop, and we ask the leaders of those communities, be they the Islamic or the Hispanic or the black community, to speak out and to tell their people, this has got to stop.
Why do you think we're seeing leaders in these communities in New York, such as Louis Farrakhan or Linda Sarsour or Al Sharpton, really condemning these attacks or coming out strongly against these attacks and really speaking up? I haven't heard anything out of these people.
They don't care. Linda Sarsour is an anti-Semite. Now, she might give it some lip service because it's good PR for her, just like she said she would endorse Bernie Sanders for being the first Jewish president. That's because he's anti-Israel, and he's probably anti-Jewish too in many ways. Farrakhan is Farrakhan, and Al Sharpton's a phony.
Farrakhan is Farrakhan.
He's a phony.
I also wanted to ask you, so since we're seeing the rise of these attacks against Jews in these communities, do you think we should give the ability to any of these people to arm themselves with firearms to protect themselves?
That's everybody's individual choice. I've never actually thought about it, but I did think about Jews should defend themselves. They should be strong physically. They have these groups called Shomrim, which are guardians, protectors within the community. But I never.
Do you think firearms would make any sense in the community defending themselves? Because when I hear these stories of hate crimes like that, even rapes, I want to see those stories turn into citizen defends himself against hate attacks or against rapes like that.
Whatever a citizen is allowed to do legally to defend himself, that's what he should do, if he wants to. Some people are not of that proclivity. They're not inclined to do it, but self-defense is one of the commandments in the Torah.
It's also the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, too.
That's right. So isn't that a nice convergence?
It's beautiful.
Founding fathers and Moses, good convergence, yes.
I also know that this is going to be the last question. We're hearing a lot about anti-Semitism in the mainstream media. I hear about it all the time, but they seem to focus mostly, I hear about Nazis, I'm hearing a lot about white supremacists, and there are those attacks in the United States. But what do you think about the media mostly focusing on those things?
Because the media isn't as concerned so much about anti-Semitism as it is about trying to demonize the right. If they cared about anti-Semitism, they would be talking about the BDS movement, the Linda Sarsours, the Tlaibs, the Omars. They would be talking about what's happening in the colleges. They'll be talking about all the anti-Israel people within the Democrat Party. For this, the media is just an excuse for them to go after the right. Now, there are some people, but I'm much more afraid about the left because the left is part of the culture. It's part of the media. They're much more dangerous, and they're much bigger, and they're not ostracized. They're accepted, as opposed to these people on the right. These people are disenfranchised. Nobody wants them. But the media is doing this. They're using anti-Semitism for their own political reasons to demonize the right and ultimately always to demonize Trump. Yeah. It's always to demonize Trump.
Do the Democrats have any role in normalizing this by not condemning people like Ilhan Omar that she's a Democrat, right? And I don't hear much about Nancy Pelosi.
Of course they have a role. We at the Conference of Jewish Affairs had a sit-in Pelosi's office precisely because she would not condemn the anti-Semitism of Ilhan Omar. She punted. She wouldn't do it.
Yeah. So, and why not? Why don't you think she is doing it?
Because two things. Number one, she wants the Muslim vote, she wants the Hispanic vote, she wants the black vote. Secondly, and that's the worst thing of all, she knows that the Jews are going to vote Democrat anyways. She's got all these Democrats in Congress, from Chuck Schumer to Steve Cohen to Yarmouth to Jan Schakowsky to Nita Lowey to Elliot Engel.
Even if you need to go all the way to Bernie Sanders, so it's the whole...
And they don't care. They care, but given the choice, they're careerists. Their career and party comes first.
Absolutely. Just quickly in conclusion, was there anything else you wanted to mention?
Not at all. Good interview.
Thank you so much for your time, sir. I really appreciate it. You were telling me you think you'd have an interesting perspective because a lot of the people here might be conservative, but you're a liberal. Tell me a little bit more about why you're here.
Okay. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I'm anti-Trump. I want to put that on the record for right away. I'm not a Trump supporter, and there might be I wanted to make a statement because I want to be clear that not everybody here is for Trump, but we're united in a bipartisan, nonpartisan way against the anti-Semitism that's happening in New York City. Absolutely. And I have no tolerance for that. I'm a daughter of an Auschwitz survivor, and most of my family was killed in Auschwitz. My grandmother, my aunts and uncles, they were all killed there. And my father just died a few months ago. So I'm here today in his memory too, to make what he went through count for something. When there are people being beat up on the streets of Brooklyn, and New York City officials are not responding, I'm not going to get into hyper-partisan mode.
Yeah. I want to follow up with you there, though, because we are seeing the normalizing of some people that we identify as anti-Semitic, i.e., Linda Sarsour. She was normalized in the Women's March, and now she's a surrogate for Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, obviously, is a Democrat, the only Jewish Democrat, actually, who is running for president. What do you think about that? Do you view Linda as anti-Semitic, and what do you think about Bernie as a Jewish person, kind of normalizing her?
I think if someone there used the word Ashanda, I'm going to repeat that and magnify it. It's Ashanda, because...
And what does that mean?
Ashanda means an outrage. That Bernie Sanders, how wonderful it would have been if there were a first Jewish candidate for office who represented the vast majority of Jewish viewpoints on every part of the political spectrum. How wonderful that would have been. And instead, we're saddled with the likes of Bernie Sanders, and Jews have been put in the very difficult position of feeling like they're a football of some kind between,
like a political tool almost, right?
A political tool, yeah, that's a good word for it. But it's really, I don't know what to say. If it becomes a contest between Bernie and Trump, I'm officially a disenfranchised voter, and I'm a lifelong Democrat.
Do you think any Democrat politician is really taking the task of anti-Semitism seriously that you could name off that you think is doing a good job?
I think that they are addressing it. I think they're all a little gun shy. I think that what they need to do is really rally. They really need to rally the people of color and the gay community and everybody to rally around this issue, just the way they approach homophobia and the way they approach racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia. It needs to have the same import. It needs to be politically unacceptable to tolerate attacks on Jewish New Yorkers like this, and to render them invisible. It's shades of pre-Nazi.
My last question, I know the mainstream media is talking a lot about anti-Semitism, but they're mostly focusing on Nazi and white supremacist anti-Semitism, which certainly exists. There's been mass shooting at synagogues perpetrated by white supremacists, but why do you think they're focusing on that and not any other types of anti-Semitism?
Look, my entire family was killed by Nazis, so I will never downplay, and as a lifelong Democrat, I hear the voices of concern in the Islamic community, and the bombings in a mosque are horrific, and I support the Muslim community. I want the same support back. I want them to care about my welfare. I want them to care about Jewish welfare.
Do you think the Jewish community gets that support back from any Muslim communities? Because I know some people like Ilhan Omar says she supports Jewish people.
I think Ilhan Omar has basically laid out her cards with negative comments like Benjamin's, and I'm not going to.
She even makes light of things like 9/11. But just in conclusion, was there anything else you wanted to mention?
No, that's about it. I think that's probably enough. I think unless there's something more.
No, that's good. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. We're out here today in New York City at the rally against anti-Semitism. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you're out here and what changes you want to see made?
Well, I'm out here because I've become a voice for this community. My name is Sid Rosenberg. I'm one of the morning show hosts on 77 WABC Radio, along with Bernard McGurk. We were placed on Imus about 2 years ago. Anyway, I'm a Jewish kid from Brooklyn. I'm not as observant as some of the folks that are here today, to be honest with you. But I was bar mitzvah. I've got Yiddishkeit in my house. I'm getting ready to celebrate Rosh Hashanah like the rest of you folks. And I am sickened by what's going on in New York particularly, but around the world today. And really enough is enough. So even on a football Sunday, where I actually work covering Giant and Jet games, I'm here instead.
I wanted to follow up there. You said you grew up in Brooklyn. I know back in the day there was a lot of race riots in Brooklyn with people like Al Sharpton, people like Linda Sarsour rising up now. Bernie Sanders recently brought on Linda Sarsour as a surrogate. It's interesting because he is a secular Jew, the only one running, and he kind of brought her on. What do you think about, we have Democratic candidates mainstreaming anti-Semitic figures, if you think she's anti-Semitic?
Well,
what do you think about that?
That's exactly what my show with Bernard is all about every morning. We call out the squad, Omar, Talib, AOC, they're all the same. we certainly talked about Bernie employing Linda Sarsour. Linda Sarsour, if you don't know who she is, folks, she's one of the ladies that helped start the Women's March. She is no longer part of that because of her anti-Semitism. She's also very, very good friends with Louis Farrakhan, and also hangs out
in New York too, up in the Bronx.
That's right, and also hangs out with Kirsten Gillibrand, who most recently backed out of the race. Bernie Sanders is the worst type of Jew. As a Jewish person myself, I don't consider him a Jew. He's a guy that puts Palestinians before Israelis. He hires Linda Sarsour. So to me, he is the worst kind of Jew, and there are too many Jews like Bernie Sanders. Here's my issue. It's one thing for the non-Jews to talk badly about my people, to do what they've been doing. My issue is people like Chuck Schumer, Elliot Engel, Max Rose on Staten Island. These are Jewish people who stand idly by and don't say a damn thing. To me, they're worse than the Squad or Bernie Sanders.
I want to follow up there too. So I know we're seeing attacks with things like rocks in Williamsburg. Do you think we should start rallying for gun rights or something like that to give the opportunity for these Jewish people being attacked to defend themselves?
I don't think Jewish people are going to start walking around the streets like Charles Bronson, with guns and looking to shoot people. But
looking to defend themselves if they're being attacked like this, right?
I think the city. I think some of the onus is on the city. I know Governor Cuomo came out with something recently, but we need this crappy mayor, Bill de Blasio, to start to realize some of these issues. Yeah, the subway's a mess. Yeah, there's dirt all over the place. Yes, the homeless are an issue. I live in this city. But the attacks on Jews is something they should be taking very, very seriously. Look, I'm a Jewish kid. I can defend myself. I bench press 300 pounds. I invite any one of you people to come up to me and start with me. I will knock you out. But the truth is, some of these folks just can't do that. And while it'd be nice to arm them, the truth is it's on the city to help us out.
Absolutely. And I had one last question. I pay close attention to the media, and the media is talking about anti-Semitism, but they're mostly talking about it from like a Nazi and white supremacist perspective and not really anything else. Do you think they're really, the media is chasing the right lead here with where this anti-Semitism is rooted and coming from? And why do you think they're talking mostly about white supremacists and Nazis and things like that?
Well, you know the answer to that, because everybody hates a white supremacist. Everybody hates a Nazi. It's easy for them. They've also aligned Donald Trump with David Duke and the Nazis, which is ridiculous considering he's got a son-in-law who's more religious than me and all my friends combined.
And his daughter, not to mention now.
That's right, who actually converted to Judaism. And Donald Trump has been to the High Holy Days to shul on the High Holy Days. Look, the African-American community takes some hits here. I can tell you in the last couple of weeks there's been a number of attacks where blacks have gone after Jewish kids. And never going to say that in the media, never, ever, ever.
Why don't you think we see people like Linda Sarsour or who was it, Al Sharpton, and people like that coming out and condemning attacks like this against this community? Why aren't these leaders doing that? Because Al Sharpton's a mainstream figure now. He has shows on MSNBC. What's the deal?
Doesn't like the Jews. Do I need to mention Yanko Rosenbaum's name again?
Please go on.
Yanko Rosenbaum. I mean, that's the fact. He doesn't like the Jews. Sarsour doesn't like the Jews. And one of the issues in this country today is that white people pander to black people. And if an African-American person commits a crime, the white media will give them the benefit of the doubt. And that's what's been going on lately here, more than skinheads and Nazis. But the people you're asking to take a stand are people that don't like us to begin with. So we're not going to have any luck with those folks.
Absolutely. Just in conclusion, was there anything else you wanted to mention?
Well, I just think it's important for everybody out there, whether you're the most religious Jew, a Hasidim, or a Reform Jew who goes to shul once or twice a year. We're all the same, and even people that aren't Jewish. There's a lot of folks out here today that are not even Jewish, but they see the injustices going on around our community. In fact, I had a very nice Irish lady walk up to me just now and say, listen, I'm a big fan of your show. I'm not Jewish, but I'm out here today to do the right thing. The right thing is stop the anti-Semitism, stop the people from gaining power that, in fact, make decisions that make life worse for people like us.
Thank you so much for your time, sir. I really appreciate it. So we're out here today in New York City for the rally against anti-Semitism. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you guys are out here and what you guys are trying to accomplish?
Well, very simple. The statistics, the numbers in terms of anti-Semitic acts are out of control. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. We've never had anything like this in my lifetime, not just the last 10 years or 20, never had anything like this. And many people feel that while politicians get up and say, we're against anti-Semitism, that doesn't take any courage. The question is, what are we going to do? Absolutely. Why are we not addressing the actual, who are the perpetrators? Why do they have such hate that they would just walk over to an innocent person and belt them in the face and create fear? Every time there's an incident, it's not just the victim that's traumatized, it's a community that's traumatized. So more needs to be done, whether it's the mayor and everyone else.
Why do you think we're seeing this rise of anti-Semitism now, specifically in the United States in general, yes, but also specifically in different parts of Brooklyn?
First of all, I don't have the answer to that question. Anti-Semitism was always there. Hatred towards Jews, why? We need a lot more time than you have for me to talk about that. But it's always been an issue. Why now more than ever? I really don't know. I know that, look, there are problems on the political right. We know that. 13 Jews have been murdered in synagogues, right? And
multiple attacks like that on synagogues.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a problem. But everybody's united on that. That's a horror.
The mainstream media is all about the same page about that type of anti-Semitism. But what about
the media? Unquestionably, does not deal with this the same way they deal with other things, other kinds of hate. There's no question. CNN just did a story on this issue. After a year, they finally did a story, and that's because they were pushed into it.
Yeah.
So all we're saying is something is wrong. How are we going to deal with it? We can't just talk, and it'll go away. We can't pretend. We need to stop pretending. So if the mayor were to take this as what I'm asking for, a state of emergency, and whatever that encompasses, I guarantee you we'll get a lot further along than we are right now.
Yeah. I also want to follow up with you and ask, we're seeing one of the most mainstream candidates of Jewish ethnicity, Bernie Sanders, bringing on people like Linda Sarsour as a surrogate. What do you think about people like that, mainstreaming generally recognized figures of anti-Semitism, people like Linda Sarsour, who are from Brooklyn, and people like Al Sharpton, who are regular on MSNBC. Then we have Louis Farrakhan up in the Bronx. What do you think about Bernie mainstreaming all of that?
That's what's happened in the Democratic Party in particular. Tlaib and Omar, they said the most horrendous things imaginable. You know, what Goebbels would have been proud of from Nazi Germany. And they continue, and they get covers on magazines, which I don't get.
But now Bernie, being a secular Jew, bring on somebody like Linda, specifically from Brooklyn. What's the thought?
Bernie Sanders there's nothing about him that's Jewish except that he was born a Jew, and I give them that. He's a Jew. But there's nothing Jewish about him. Nothing
religiously
at all in his life, exactly. And for him to do something like that contributes to the hate we're talking about today. That contributes. When a Linda Sarsour, and it would take me half hour to go through a Rosemary Oda that she hugged not so long ago, calling her heroine, who was involved in the bombing of a supermarket in Jerusalem, throwing rocks at people in Israel. The list goes on and on and on. When you legitimize haters like Linda Sarsour, that's the beginning of the end. And the worst part is not Bernie Sanders. It's the other Democratic candidates. I haven't heard anything from